All right, well, we're going with an e4, and he pre-moves to Sicilian. Okay. We've been playing the Alapin a ton, and I'm kind of tired of it. And on this speedrun, we've mostly been playing the open Sicilian. So well, we could also play the Smith Morra, which is something we haven't played much. I don't know the Smith Morra too well, though. But let's do it. Let's try it. All right, I'm game for the Smith Morra. I'm totally game for the Smith Morra. The problem is, okay, so he goes d6, and our choice is immediately justified. d6 is a bad move. So our opponent, I assume, is not very confident in the accepted Smith Morra. Now, as I've indicated previously, declining the Smith Morra, the best way to do that is to play knight f6. That transposes the game into the Alapin, into a very reputable line of the Alapin. This move simply allows us to grab the pawn and get a huge center and just get a big advantage out of the opening. Okay, so a6, he's playing some sort of a Najdorf-like setup, but this is already asking for trouble, so all we need to do here is develop our pieces. Some people, I think, would be tempted to go a4 here to stop b5. That is a sensible move. A case could be made for that, but we don't really need to stop b5. It's not such a dangerous idea. All we want to do here for now is to develop our knights. Knight c3, knight f3. And he goes b5. Okay, so in terms of this bishop on f1, where should we position the bishop? I mean, we don't have that many choices. Should we even develop that bishop? Should we develop the other one? Yeah, so we should definitely go bishop d3 and lend further support to the e4 pawn, because if we go bishop b2, not only is it more passive, but the move b4 becomes very nasty, and then the e4 pawn could get loose. Also, bishop b7 would come with tempo because it would attack the pawn. So bishop d3, we talked about this yesterday. It's almost like a prophylactic move. You're already defending the pawn so that bad stuff can't happen to it, etc., etc. All right, thank you, Scooter. And he finally settles down to think bishop b7. Okay, so he plays a pretty sensible setup. There's nothing horribly wrong with how he's playing, but he's going to have to be extremely careful. Okay, so the first thing to understand is, thank you, Phil IXZ, is he threatening b4? Is that a threat? And let me tell you straight away that the answer to that is no. There is a conceptual reason that it's not a threat, but there's also a specific reason that it's not a threat. If he plays b4, we have an important tactical resource in response. We can win it with the queen. We can play queen a4 check, forking the pawn and the king. Now, in response to that, he could play knight c6. And after the game, I'll delve into the details. Unless he plays b4 here, we can castle. But knight c6 loses the game there to a very pretty tactical sequence. Okay, goes knight b to d7. Okay, so I think some of you are rearing to go and excited to play e5. e5 is premature, unfortunately. And the reason is that after de, de, who can tell me, what very nasty tactical move black has there? That e5, well, it loses a pawn and potentially even a piece. Black plays bishop takes f3, removing the defender of the pawn. And if queen takes f3, then we walk into a fork on top of that. So we're going to have to take with a pawn. Ugh. So we're not ready for e5 yet, but that's okay. So that doesn't mean we can't prepare e5, and that doesn't mean we can't support this pawn further. So what would be a good way to do all of that at the same time? Yeah, rook e1. Continue developing, eyeing e5. Now, he goes e6. This guy is good. He's setting up his position in a very good way. So he's going to be slightly worse here, but he's managed to avoid the worst of it. So we're just going to have to settle in for the long haul. All right, so now this bishop can be developed to a wide variety of squares. But before we do that, this move b4 now becomes a headache. It becomes a serious headache because queen a4 is no longer a check. So a move that a lot of players hesitate to make because it looks a little bit lame. But let's eliminate the headache. We have the luxury of doing that because we have the center. We have a very solid position. We have a couple of tempi to spare. So bishop b7. Now we can develop both to f4 and to g5. Again, I think a case could be made for both moves. But which one should be preferred? I prefer f4. As we already discussed, this move loses a lot of its effectiveness when it doesn't pin the knight. In addition, this pawn on d6 is a bit tender, so let's begin to harass it just a little bit. Okay, now we have one more improving move that we should make, just as a matter of bringing our pieces into the game. What am I talking about? Rook c1. Yeah, very unoriginal, simple, healthy chess. And there's one more move, just one more move that we should make just to eliminate any headaches in the future. This is a move you make if you have the luxury of making it. And that is the move h3. Not only does it create some luft, but in the event of a move like knight h5, the bishop kind of London style could drop back to h2. So not forced, not necessarily. Okay, h6. Now h6 is a mistake. h6 is a mistake because remember, black is a lot more passive than we are. So our attacking capabilities in this position are far greater than black's. There is a very classic tactical idea in this position. You've seen me play this a million times in games against other GMs. This is a hook. That bishop on f4 is staring right at the pawn, so immediately your tactical alarm bell should start ringing. Now, sacrificing on h6 immediately is premature, clearly, but we can prepare it. We go up to d2, we build a battery, and we are ready to sacrifice on h6 if the conditions are right. But rook e8 is good. Yeah, this guy's finding some good moves despite playing instantly. So let me think for a second. Yeah, I actually have to calculate, unlike him. Okay, so there's something very interesting. Let's sack. Let's sack on h6. Okay, now the reason rook e8 is a genius move is because after queen takes h6, he can drop his bishop to f8 and re-fianchetto it and bring pieces into the defense. But before taking on h6, there is a reason that we put the bishop on d3, and that is to do what? We can play e5, open up the bishop, attack the knight, and now queen takes h6 is going to come with far greater effect, assuming he moves the knight, which would be suicidal, because then we take on h6, and you know this is totally crushing. But I'll put it this way: this sacrifice is dubious. I wouldn't do this against the GM, but I'm trying to showcase some of the attacking ideas here. I'm sure the computer is laughing at me right now. Well, let's see how he deals with the concrete problems that are facing him. So I try to be, as a general rule, I try to play soundly, but you know, sometimes you can bend the rules a little bit because this is an idea that I really want to illustrate. It's dubious. I'll show you after the game a couple of ways, assuming he doesn't find a good defense. Knight h7, I think, is not the way. Now, obviously, in the interest of time, I'm just going to take on h6 and knight f8. Not a bad idea, actually. He's not going gentle into that good knight. So how do we attack from this position? What should we do? Well, first we should identify the sources of danger. Where are the threats going to come from? One of the ideas he has is to play bishop g5 and involves queen. So that's a pretty dangerous idea. And that's a very dangerous idea, actually. Let me think. Okay, so the way that we can deal with that idea is simply by taking on d6. By taking on d6, we are forcing him to either take with the bishop or the queen, and in doing so, he's going to basically kill his own battery, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, well, if he goes bishop f6, he's going to also have to reckon with this potential idea of forking both of his rooks. So I don't think that's that's particularly sustainable. Okay, bishop g5. Okay, so I believe that that's a mistake. And it's a mistake for a very beautiful reason. Well, very beautiful. For a nice reason. We take on g5, and I hope he takes with the queen. Oh, I also could have... I made a slight inaccuracy here. I made a slight inaccuracy. But he should take with the knight here, which is a very difficult move to make after playing bishop g5, because the whole idea is to take with the queen. Wow. Okay, I should have taken on h7 first, but that's okay. I think we're still in good shape. Let me just think about what to do here. Yeah, so there's many good moves in this position, I think. There's many good moves in this position, but I think the most... Okay, so this is a little bit hard for me to explain because there's a lot of concrete lines here. Some of you are seeing rook e5, but rook e5, amazingly, he's got f6. Now, let me walk you through it this way. The first move I saw is h4 attacking the knight. But after h4, the knight can drop back to h7, but that's the only square the knight has. Now, why is h7 available to him? It's because this incredibly annoying knight on f8 is securing the h7 square. So hypothetically, if there was a way to distract the knight from f8, then h4 would literally trap the knight. So we go d7. Queen can't take the pawn because we take the knight with check. And if knight takes d7, then we go either h4 or even f4. Both moves seem pretty good, but h4 seems a little bit less exposing, and we win the knight back. And we're going to be up a couple of pawns. So this is not a simple idea at all, but I think I was able to walk you guys through the logic. It's very nice, and that's why I said leaving this pawn on d6 is going to be a pretty big mistake, because we're going to have some idea that involves using the pawn as a decoy. The strain on his position is just too much. There's too much going on, and his pieces are not quite capable of dealing with it. Now, this is not winning, and what a GM would do is go like knight f3 or knight h3. Basically, the logic is, like, if you're already losing your knight, you might as well ruin white's structure with it. But the problem is, if he goes knight f3, we take on f3 and we open up the g file. So that could result in black getting checkmated unless he's very, very careful. So we'll see. Knight f8. Okay, he doesn't do it. That's not a bad move either. Okay, so let's take. I got to play a little bit faster. Oh, he finds queen d4. Now, that's definitely the best line. Okay. Now, one thing I'm seeing immediately is the idea of lifting the knight up to f6, but unfortunately, it doesn't quite work because there's a bishop on b7 that's guarding that square. So what idea stems from that? What idea should we note down in case we get a chance to use it? How do we modify this idea to make sure that this bishop is eliminated? We can play bishop e4, hoping for bishop takes, knight takes, but he doesn't have really a choice. He can't. He's going to have to go for the bishop trade one way or another, and so that's something that we immediately note down. Other ideas. Notice how I'm already looking for ideas on his turn so that I can make my move more efficient. There's a classic idea of the rook lift, rook e3, rook h3. If he doesn't take the pawn, that would be a good idea. If he does, that doesn't come fast enough because his queen swings back to g7. D5 would block the diagonal. That's also interesting. g6 is another idea, using this pawn to crack open his king side. So, okay, rook c7. That's definitely too slow. And, yeah, so I like the idea of bishop e4. I think bishop e4 might be the strongest idea of all of the ones I've mentioned because it's most immediate. Now, yeah, he allows it. Knight takes d4. Now the knight's coming to f6, and the game is over. The knight is coming to f6, and he will not be able to stop the lobster pincer mate. And I'll explain, you know, there's a lot to unpack here. Yeah, so d5 would not have been quite as good because after ed, while we have succeeded in blocking the diagonal, now the pawn fulfills the duty of the bishop in securing the e4 square. All right. So knight h7. He's trying his best to defend. What should we do? Is knight f6 still possible? Should we play it? Yeah, we should definitely play it. Knight f6, of course. Knight f6, gf, and queen g7 is unstoppable other than with giving up his queen. So we could have also taken the rook first, but this is more efficient. And it's over. Lobster time. Classic lobster pincer mate on g7. Unstoppable. Very nicely done by my opponent, though. That was very well defended for a long time. And, you know, that was close. But ultimately, yeah, so he plays it, but doesn't matter. But you can see, okay, so rook takes c7 makes sense. Now d5 is good to open the e file. Thank you for the sub, TK642. Yeah, d5 is very... Oh, queen d8 also wins the rook. Yeah, let's just win the rook. Queen d8 just wins the rook. And he resigns. I have things under control for sure, but, you know, I'll explain why I wouldn't go for this against a GM. Okay, 1700 has been reached. Very nice. Let's have a look at the game, and I'll call it a night. So the Smith-Morra, I have a very high opinion of the Smith-Morra. I have a very high opinion of Mark Esserman's book on the Smith-Morra. So if you're looking for a, you know, gunpowder repertoire, you know, if you're looking for something that fits your aggressive needs, I'm very much, I don't have his book, but I've read excerpts from it, and I know he's a very good analyst. So Mayhem in the Morra is a great book. Mark's definitely the authority in the Morra. Now, obviously, there are lines that Black has in the accepted Morra that equalize. Famously, Logazar found an interesting way to deal with the Morra. It doesn't refute it, but Black certainly equalizes. There's no doubt about that. But I've never accepted the Morra. I never have had this position with Black because I hate playing against it. Or I have many, many years ago, but ever since I became a master, I've always declined the Morra. And you can decline the Morra in one of several ways. You can play knight f6. That's my recommended move. That transforms the game into the Alapin. Or you can play d3. This is not quite as good, but it is a very solid line, and it leads to a very positional type of struggle. White generally goes c4 and gets this like Marozzi bind type structure. So this position resembles a Marozzi bind. I've played this a couple of times over the board with Black. Black is solid here, but slightly worse. Now the difference between here and the Danish, well, the difference is that Black hasn't moved his e-pawn. He's moved his c-pawn instead. So you don't play bishop c4 here. That's not what you do. That's like a Sicilian Danish, but that's no longer as effective because Black's central pawns are intact. Okay. Let me see. So yeah, the Smith-Morra is a classic opening where players at the top don't play it, and so you might think, well, what's wrong with it? And nothing is wrong with it. It's not been refuted. And even if you don't end up playing the Smith-Morra, learning it and understanding the ideas can be a very, very good shortcut to getting better at attacking and understanding sacrifices. So again, Mark didn't pay me to say this. We had a match in the Morra, but I'm a big fan of this opening for many different reasons. Now d6 is another way of declining it, which is not terrible, but clearly Black is going to be worse. I mean, he's giving us the full control of the center, and he's giving us very nice piece development. So, you know, Black is not losing here. Like, this is not a disaster, but we have a very pleasant position. Okay. So, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, b5. And b5 is a nice move. I like the way he handled this. And in retrospect, it might have made sense to play a4. I don't love playing this move. You know, it creates a little hole on b4 and stuff. But maybe it made sense to prevent b5. That's just one thing to consider. Knight f3, b5, bishop d3. So we get our bishop out in order to support the e4 pawn. Thank you. I love hearing that, TK. Thank you for the sub earlier. Bishop b7. And again, in such positions, on every move, you have to start asking yourself the question, do I want to play e5? Do I want to strike in the center? And here the answer is no, because it doesn't do all that much. D takes e5, D takes e5. And whenever you push a central pawn, there's a square that is left behind. In this case, the square is d5. Knight d5, Black is fine. And then Black could cement the outpost with e6. White could try something like e6 here, sacrificing the pawn to slow down the development of Black's bishop. But I felt like this was a little bit over the top. But you could definitely have a look at it on your own with a computer. Maybe e5 was, in fact, the way to punish this. Can you show us what you do after b4? b4 where? b4 here? Oh, yeah, so b4 here, you go queen a4 check, and this is easy. This just wins the pawn, because knight c6 is not possible. b4 here, queen a4 check, knight c6. Who can tell me white's best move? This is a classic application of, you know, the Sam Shanklin question, not moving the knight from c3 just because it's being attacked. Go d5. Easy to calculate. bc, dc. And you're threatening c7. You're threatening the bishop. White is just totally crushing here. So that's pretty simple. But even if you didn't have this move, I mean, just moving the knight is fine. This pawn now becomes a very big weakness. So knight c6 was not possible here. I assume you're asking why. Because of queen takes c6. Just take the knight. That square is not defended. Okay. So rook e1, we decided to play. e6. That's a good move. Now black can still play b4 here. And if you have an understanding of the Smith-Morra, I think it's easier to play these types of positions with white. What I would have done here, there's two approaches. You can take a very positional approach. And you can make a move here that's going to look terrible to most people. And that's just to drop the knight back to b1. Now, what's the what's the logic here? Well, again, something I said earlier is important, which is that our position is under no immediate duress. We've got the center. The center is well defended. Black's development is okay, but quite passive. And so we can afford the luxury of rerouting our pieces as we see fit. So, as many of you are indicating, the move b4 creates somewhat of a hole on c4. It creates an entire complex of weaknesses that surround the pawn, and the pawn itself is quite weak itself. So everything around the pawn as well as the pawn is weak. And that knight on b1, after preliminarily developing the bishop, so this move doesn't block it, we can get the knight over to c4, or we can get the knight over to b3, and potentially even stick that knight on a5. So moving pawns like this on the queen side, unless you have a very compelling reason to do so, can backfire in a very big way. I don't know if that makes sense. So, one moment. So, knight d5 is the tactical approach. Knight b1 is the positional approach. And the point of the tactical approach, okay, is that we sacrifice a pawn. What do we get in return for the pawn? Well, we get the e-file. And what's killing black here is the fact that he hasn't developed his king side. So white can literally just jump on him, and I don't think black's going to be able to carry his king away from the center. So what move seems very logical here? Yeah, knight g5. Knight g5 is just a classic way of attacking, and then queen h5. And you're just converging on black here. And this is crushing. This is, I mean, even without analyzing anything, this just seems totally overwhelming. Okay, so you have a positional approach, you have a tactical approach. Now, I probably wouldn't even take this knight if I were black. I would either go e6 and just jettison the pawn, or maybe go a5 first to defend it, although that is kind of iffy. So rook e1, he goes e6. We go a3. Now we stop b4, because it's not that b4 was dangerous. I just want to eliminate the headache of having to deal with it on every move. Oh, it's more than the rare occasion. So bishop f4, h3, rook c1, rook c8, h3. This is all normal. And now h6. And again, when you develop passively, you have to be a lot more careful about making these types of making these types of weakening moves. And if I were black, I would play rook e8 here instead. And after rook e8, h6 becomes a lot more doable. Because, for example, let's make a random move for white. After h6, queen d2 here, black can successfully parry the threat of bishop takes h6 with what move? Yeah, so bishop f8 simply. And the bishop x-ray defends the h6 pawn. So bishop h6 is no longer effective. You can't take it with the queen. So there was a question about pawn breaks, e5 and d5. Well, as I said earlier, you should be aware of the concept. You should consider these pawn breaks on every move, although you shouldn't obsess over it. And e5 was bad previously, is bad for the same reason. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Queen d2 is what I would have played here. After rook e8, we would have played queen d2, and then black can play bishop f8. So it's not like black needs to play h6 or else he's going to not be able to survive. But this setup is good anyway because now the rook is sort of participating in the game. And it's just a nice solid setup for black. You can try knight b6 later. The game goes on. Now the problem is with the move e5, as it was previously, we are giving this very nice square on d5. So d, e, d, knight d5. Black's got such a solid bishop here. Good diagonal. White hasn't gained anything other than a little bit of space. And the move d5 in the same vein just meets with e5, and I'm not sure that closing up the position is necessarily good for white. So you want to consider these moves carefully, but you don't want to obsess over it. Sometimes just keeping the status quo is going to be the best general option. And I like this plan. Bishop b1, queen d3, building up a battery. That's one of the plans that white can consider here in order to eventually threaten the move e5. Okay, so h6, queen d2, rook e8. We made the decision to take. First of all, I hope it makes sense why taking, I think, is bad, because bishop f8 happens. We only have one check. The bishop is a crucial defender here. And once he moves his knight aside, his queen is going to participate in the defense. So I'm just not sure that white's got enough resources here. But the move e5 first involves the bishop and attacks the knight. So after d takes e5, which I would have played, I would have taken on e5 first. And one of the things that I would have considered here for black, and this is something that you'll see often in the games of GMs, is as soon as a piece is sacrificed, you have to have the awareness that you are holding a very valuable bargaining chip. You can sacrifice the piece back when the time is right in order to advantageously end the attack. So a piece is a very big deal. And I think that black can do this in one of two different ways. Thank you, Vakas, for the 6 month. The first is to play bishop takes f3. Okay? So the point of this move is not to hold on to the extra piece. White can play ef6, bishop f6, and gf3, and white's restored material equality. But the problem is that look at white's king now, look at the pawn structure, and if you're very tactically sharp, you will notice that the queens are in a standoff, and black is the one who can exploit that standoff to his favor with knight e5. And all of a sudden, white is in big trouble. The bishop is hanging, you're threatening a royal fork, a family fork. I don't think white can hold on here. Rook e3, there's bishop g5, there's all these pins. So that would be one thing I would consider. And if I were white here, I would play g takes f3. I wouldn't take the knight. But at the very least, black can simply play knight takes e5, insisting on giving the piece away. Rook takes e5. In a very simple Zen move, such as bishop f8, with the aforementioned idea of rerouting the bishop, seems to be very good for black. I think black is better here. I don't think white is nearly losing or anything like that, but it seems like black is now firmly in the driver's seat. Another idea in much the same vein is to go knight to c5, basically immediately trying to exploit the queen standoff and force a trade of queens, which is advantageous for black, because now black has the two bishops. So white has to defend the bishop. You can move it, and at the very least, black trades queens, and black's got an amazing endgame here with excellent piece activity. So what I was relying on is that my opponent wouldn't occur to my opponent to give back the extra piece so quickly after he's accepted the sacrifice, right? And that's an idea that you should always hold on to. It's sometimes never too early to give back the extra piece if you're giving it back for a very good reason. And that's a very common misconception that, well, my opponent sacrificed a piece, so, you know, now I have an extra piece and I have to hold on to it. You actually don't. You can give it away if the situation and the conditions are right. Knight h7 is a mistake. Queen takes h6. And knight df8. This is an interesting defensive setup, but I don't think it quite passes muster. So e takes d6, right? Now, if he would have taken on d6, then he is no longer threatening the move queen g5 or bishop g5. So the queen on h6 is a lot safer now than it was previously, and I have time to accumulate my attacking forces. So one idea here is to go bishop e4. Bishop takes e4, knight takes e4. You should already be familiar with this idea from the game. And the game continues. Now remember that white has two pawns for the pieces. We've not sacrificed a piece for nothing. We have two pawns. So even if the attack backfires, we will have something to fall back on. Not ideal, but we will not be completely losing. So for example, rook c1, and the game continues. I think the position is quite unclear here. White's got excellent attacking chances, but at the same time, you know, we're nowhere close to delivering checkmate. All right, so the position here is very, very interesting. And I would invite you to analyze it on your own or the computer. That would be a great way to build up your attacking capabilities. Okay, just making sure you guys are getting it. I feel like nobody said anything in like a minute. Okay, great. Oh, it's sub only. Yeah, let's eliminate sub only. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's okay, Bruja. I can see some people are like trolling and stuff, but since it's the speed run, I want people to be able to ask questions. Yeah, just behave, guys. Don't give Bruja a hard time. When we're doing the speed run, no spamming, no trolling. It's like we're all, and 99% of people are abiding by this, but it's important that we keep the educational flow going. Okay. Yeah, hyping me up is always welcome as well. All right. So I hope that makes sense. Bishop d6, bishop b4, etc. Now he plays bishop g5, and this leads to some very, very cool complications. So at this point, I recognized that this idea of d7 could come in very, very handy. And after knight takes g5, I was hoping he would play queen takes g5, so I would have a chance to show a very instructive idea. So what should white do here? And the entire attack would fail if not for this idea. And this idea is quite instructive. So let's deconstruct the logic, right? Everybody should see that the idea of d7 could be very, very strong. If you could somehow eliminate the knight from f8, if you could deal with the threat of checkmate, you would play d7 and win one of the rooks. So immediately what comes to mind, well, let's take and play d7. But no, the knight is still on f8. You just take on d7. But you can play the intermediate move, bishop takes h7 check, then take the queen, and then play d7, and you will end up being up in exchange and a bunch of pawns. Right? Yeah, deflection is right. What's up, Salty Clan? So that's why he should have taken the pawn. Leaving a pawn like this intact is just a bad idea. And by the way, if he would have played bishop takes f3 here, of course, we would have taken his bishop first and then taken on f3. It's too late for you. It's too late for black to give back the extra piece. The train, the opportunity train has left the station. So bishop g5, knight g5. He plays knight g5. But now I think an even nicer idea. We still go d7. And there's a kind of reverse logic to that. There, we were trying to distract a knight that controlled d7. So we were trying to distract that knight and get it to h7. Now we're doing the opposite. We are trying to distract a knight that controls h7 and getting it to move on to d7. Because the idea is different. We're now trying to hit this knight and remove its capability of coming back to h7, which it had if we would have played h4. And the order matters. If we go d7 now and say, no problem, now let's distract the knight. No, you can't do that anymore. Now queen takes d7 is possible. It's the fact that black's queen is overloaded, which makes this move possible, d7. So I talked about this a lot in the 5-minute speedrun, the concept of type 1 and type 2 undefended pieces. And I haven't talked about it as much in the 10-minute speedrun, but I'll just review this concept for the people who are new to my lectures and stuff. Thank you, Curious, for the 5. So type 1 and type 2 undefended pieces. Type 1 undefended piece is a piece that is not 500 by Jan 42, that is not protected by any other pieces. So technically a bishop on b7 is a type 1 undefended piece, but a type 2 undefended piece is a piece that is protected by only one other piece. And pawns don't count. If a piece is protected by a pawn, then it's defended. So the knight on g5 is a type 2 undefended piece. And those types of pieces can also be very, very vulnerable. So when you notice the queen making contact with the knight, the queen is not a very good defender because it's generally easy to distract. And that's exactly what we do here. d7. Queen can't take because of queen g5. He takes with the knight. h4, and the knight is trapped. I think that he should have gone queen f6. That was the last chance. Big Bad Boris with a 5. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Thank you. This is getting ridiculous. But we just take on g5 and we're up, what? We're up 2 pawns. In the endgame, this is technically winning position. He collapses with knight f8. Now we go bishop b4, and we're paving the way for the knight to come to f6. Now I have one last thing to share on this position. Thank you, Big Bad Boris, once again for the 5. If he would have taken and gone rook takes rook, what is white's fastest path to checkmate? What is white's quickest path to mate? So funnily, it's just a funny line. Knight f6. And you're being cute here, but this is funny. He's got 2 rooks and a knight, but he can't defend against the almighty lobster pincer mate. That's the power of that. You can have all sorts of pieces. You could add a bishop on d5, and you could even add a queen somewhere on a4. You could add a queen on a4, and it would still be, well, no, actually black would have a defense, but you get the point. You get the point.